Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this essential conversation on embracing inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in the workplace, also known as IDEA. I'm Siobhan Williams, the Vice President of Marketing Communications at BioTalent Canada, and I'm really happy to be welcoming you here today. We have an incredible group of leaders and employers and decision makers from Ontario's bioscience sector today, all of whom have the power to shape not only the future of your organizations, but our future work in our communities. Before we get started, I'd like to take this time for land acknowledgement. As we gather virtually today, we take a moment to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Ottawa, Ontario, which is located in the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. For millennia, the Algonquin Anishinaabe have been the caretakers of this land, and their presence is woven into the history, culture, and ongoing stewardship. This land, enriched by the joining of Ottawa, Gatineau, and Rideau rivers, has been a meeting place of exchange, community, and storytelling for over 8,000 years. We wish to extend this acknowledgement to the diverse Indigenous peoples across the territories where many of you will be joining from today. Canada is home to First Nation, Innu, Métis people, which with their own unique histories, cultures, connections to this land and waters they have cared for since time immemorial. Whether you're joining from the unceded Territory 6 in Alberta, the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee people in Ontario, or the ancestral homes of the Mi'kmaq in the Atlantic region, we honor and recognize the Indigenous peoples who have shaped these territories through their resilience and strength. As we gather, let us reflect on the value of connection, not only the virtual community, but also the lands and histories that sustain us. Together, we can learn and grow in understanding, fostering inclusion and collaboration in all that we do. Thank you. So BioTalent Canada, we see IDEA not just as a framework, but as a pathway to innovation, growth, and resilience. It's embedded in everything we do for the industry and including the staff at BioTalent Canada. Research has shown that diverse teams are more innovative, drive better financial results, and solve problems more effectively. By fostering inclusivity, we're not just meeting societal expectations, we're unlocking the full potential of our workforce. Yet we know that getting started on this journey can feel daunting. Many employers hesitate to take that first step, whether it's the fear of unknown, uncertainty about compliance, or concerns about cost. And that's exactly why we're here today, to break down those barriers and show you that the small intentional changes can lead to transformative outcomes. We're committed at BioTalent Canada on this IDEA journey. Our dedication and mission has recently been recognized as the 5-star diversity, equity, and inclusion employer by Canadian HR Reporter. Through initiatives like our Ideal Bioscience Employer Recognition Program, we celebrate employers who are leading the way to building inclusive workplaces. We also support underrepresented groups, including persons with disabilities, through our new Ideal Scholarship Program, helping to ensure the diverse talents and perspectives shape the future of the bioeconomy. And through projects like this, the Enabling Change Project, we're providing employers with practical tools and resources to create accessible, inclusive environments, like through our Hiring Persons with Disabilities resource. I know the link will be in the chat later. And through discussions like this to explore the myths around creating a more inclusive workplace. One of those myths we want to tackle today is the idea of hiring persons with disabilities is costly or complex. The reality, most workplace accommodations cost under $500, and many are free. Flexibility, adaptability, technology, or even communication can be that of a difference maker that enables someone to excel. Let's talk about the numbers in Ontario. Nearly 25% of adults identify as having a disability. That's a quarter of our population, and yet persons with disabilities remain significantly underrepresented in the workforce. By hesitating to engage this talent pool, organizations miss out on innovative ideas, unmatched loyalty, and increased retention. So today is our opportunity to lean in and ask questions and engage fully in this discussion, whether you're just starting out or looking to refine your IDEA practices. There's something here for everyone. Most importantly, remember this: you don't have to have all the answers to get started. The most important thing is take that first step, and we're here to support you with that. To explore these topics, we're excited to introduce today's panel and fireside chat. Each of them brings a unique perspective and real-world experience in creating more inclusive workplaces. Let me introduce our panelists, and then I'll hand it over to them to introduce themselves. Kimberly Hansen, CEO of Health Partners, Ryan Huey, Manager Major Gifts at CNIB, and JC Doyle, Director of Development and Capacity Building at Ontario Disability Employment Network. So over to you, Kim, to give you a brief introduction.
Thank you, Siobhan. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today and to participate in this important discussion. I'm proud to be the CEO of Health Partners, which is a coalition of 17 national health charities or patient organizations that serve people with many, many different types of chronic and acute medical conditions in Canada. Prior to that, I worked in health advocacy at Diabetes Canada and for others in the health space. And I am a person who I live with an invisible disability, and I'm proud to champion the rights of those with disabilities in the workplace.
Thanks, Kim. JC.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is JC Doyle. I am the Director of Development and Capacity Building at Odin. I think that was already mentioned. Thank you, Siobhan. Odin is a member-based network of about 140 employment service providers across Ontario and beyond. We have a little branding issue with the name Ontario in our name because we do a lot of work outside of Ontario and we're growing. We get an opportunity to work with all kinds of stakeholders in the space. The space we call disability employment inclusion, and working together towards our mission simply to increase employment opportunities for people who have a disability. So very critical issue, and it is definitely a business problem that does need to be solved. Haven't worked myself out of a job yet, and hope to share some insights, and just kind of maybe some folks are starting the conversation, hope to get an opportunity to continue and support that conversation. And Odin has a lot of kind of resources and opportunities to do that. So that's me in a nutshell, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Thanks, JC. And Ryan.
Hello to everyone out there. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ryan Huey. I work for the CNIB. I'm a person that lives with vision loss. I'm a guide dog handler, and I also live with type 1 diabetes. So I have two things kind of going on, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old daughter who is at that helpful stage of actually helping me rather than tricking me, because I know that is coming. But I do love to champion the inclusiveness of employers, because a lot of employers think it's going to cost them millions of dollars to make their workplace accessible. And I'm here to tell you sometimes that's the case, but more often than not, it's not. And I love answering questions. I love telling you about my experiences and how I've come up through the ranks from the lowest level of employment at the CNIB up to where I am now, and how even just having a virtual meeting is somewhat of an accessibility feature. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. My colleague Eli Dern is monitoring the chat, and he will also be posting, and we're going to do a couple of polling questions through the discussion. But he'll be posting a link to a survey at the end. We would love your feedback on this and our other resources, because it will help us shape future resources and show the impact of this program. So up with the first, I see some people have already answered the question. Do you identify as a person with a disability? So I see right now it's 22% say yes, which is similar to the average in Ontario. So we have a slice of the population here today, which is great to see. So with that, I'm going to get started. And I'd like to ask each of you, many employers hesitate to adopt diversity inclusion strategies due to fears of getting it wrong or facing backlash. What are practical steps organizations can take to overcome these fears and create culture of inclusivity with confidence? So I can start with JC.
Yeah, we know the greatest barriers are just based on myths and fears of the unknown. So we've got to address first and foremost those unconscious bias that we all carry around. Those myths that really do hold back employers from hiring people who have a disability. And some of the myths are fears around legal fears. There's, simple fears around just saying the wrong thing, which we all do at times. So, we want to actually help to create a culture where we can make those productive mistakes and errors and help to correct people in those situations as well. As Ryan mentioned, and we'll probably talk a little bit more, there's concerns around costs, which are largely a myth. And, a lot of the narrative lately is around employers understanding that the costs associated with accommodations are actually investments that you are doing all the time with your staff and in your businesses, and they should be viewed as that. And it should be really business as usual to create a culture of accommodation for everyone, for all employees, whether they identify or disclose their disabilities.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Siobhan, I think you said something in your opening remarks that I wanted to highlight, and that is that, we don't, as leaders or employers, have to have all the ideas. And I think that that belief that we as leaders should know everything or shouldn't be asking how we can better accommodate folks with different abilities in the workplace might be at the root of why some of us hesitate to do so at all. And so I would love to invite every leader to be a little vulnerable and to recognize that we don't have to have all the answers. What I think we do have to have is the curiosity and the respect to ask folks around us who are living with different abilities what they could benefit from and how we can continue to make our society more inclusive, but especially our workplaces.
Okay. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
It's Ryan here. And for me, it begins even before we're talking workplace accessibility and workplace accommodations. For me, it begins with the application process. So when you have the idea that you're posting or you're hiring for a new position, making that accessible and that posting with the best knowledge possible for it. For instance, we'll see a lot of postings out there that say, oh, we're going to hire for an admin assistant. However, they have to have a driver's license. You're already removing a huge part of the pie that people are going to apply for that because someone like me doesn't have a driver's license, so I can't apply. So it's keeping in mind those sorts of things beforehand. And I agree with the other panelists here, not knowing everything. Take a chance. It's not for us to know everything, but the fact that you ask, it's sort of almost like going into the doctor's appointment. If you don't ask questions, you're not going to receive the best care you can. So if you're not asking the right questions or any questions at all, how can you possibly think that you're going to have the best or most inclusive staff that you can?
You've all brought some interesting points in that curiosity and respect, Kim. This can be a very private situation. Some people you're very open about your disabilities here. But some people may not be, and an employer may not know that. So how do they even start that and sort of find out if there is a need and what those maybe accommodation needs are? Like that's, I think, where some employers may stumble, or just that step. How do they start that?
It's an important question, Siobhan, and yet not a straightforward one to answer, because I think some of it starts back at the root of the culture of an organization. If you foster a culture of respect and honesty in a general sense, it will inevitably make it easier for those who may be facing different health struggles of any kind to disclose that and ask for supports. On the contrary, if you don't have a culture of respect, folks are going to feel even less able to disclose. So I think it starts by just thinking about the health of your culture at a high level. I think it also can be really important and beneficial for leaders to be open and be vulnerable themselves. And when I started disclosing in workplaces that I live with type 1 diabetes and sometimes experience struggles with it while I'm working, it felt really vulnerable. And my father said to me, you can't do that. You can't be telling people that you live with a chronic illness. They'll think you're weak. And I'm glad I didn't believe him in that instance, because I think that in fact it can show resilience and strength and adaptability. And I think that as a CEO now, it's important that I disclose to my colleagues things that I might struggle with from time to time, so as to make it safe for them to do the same.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I know I've seen that through my working career, a change that leadership vulnerability. Even here at BioTalent Canada, when we started on our idea journey, it started with Black Lives Matter, and COVID, and everyone was vulnerable then. And it was the leadership at the time, just our CEO being very vulnerable and putting it out there on that topic. And it's fun. It's grown from there, but it was those first steps. And we wish that all employers see that. So I hope that helps today. Ryan, you said something interesting. It begins with the application process. What are the practical things an employer could do besides making, the, bona fide employment requirements stated in a job description? Like, what other things, practical things, if at the start of the recruitment process, could an employer do to?
It's Ryan here. Yeah, that's a really great question. And for me, it starts with, is the platform you're using, whether it's Workopolis or Work PD, I believe, or where are you posting your jobs? How is the person applying? Is it done through a set of questions and information that they have to put into this website? Is it as simple as reach out to HR at employer.com and attach a resume? Because there's certain things that are more accessible than others, even down to if you are using a platform where you have to insert things or insert dates, times, where you graduated from. Sometimes dates have to be in a certain way, day, month, year, and that's not outlined. So it takes me 45 minutes as someone that uses a screen reader to decipher, how does this date input and what's the correct format? Even phone numbers, sometimes you use a hyphen after the area code, sometimes it's a period, sometimes it's nothing. So there's a lot of different things that you can do as an employer to outline those things. And as much as you would like for someone to be practical and have a car and be able to drive, that might be something you bring up in the interview rather than posting it on the application itself, because you're going to limit the people that you get. And I understand if it's in a rural area, there's no buses, it's working midnights, it might be hard for someone that takes public transit to get there. But that's more of a discussion, and I feel like you're respecting the applicant more if you have the discussion with them rather than just eliminating them off the bat saying, hey, you need a driver's license for this role. Unless the job is driving for UPS and delivering packages, that's a requirement, and I understand that. But for someone that lives being a person with a disability, you're already having to be really realistic about the jobs that you're applying for. Someone that uses a screen reader could possibly do all the administrative assistant roles. However, if I can't drive, it's eliminating me, right? So I can't become a pilot, I can't become a brain surgeon, I wouldn't be a firefighter. So there's the realistic aspect of it, but if you're limiting your outreach from that as an employer, I think it speaks volumes as to the culture that you guys are providing. Not you as like biotech, but just as the employer that in general that we're talking about here.
Okay, great. Some great practical tips. Thank you. JC, like when the recruitment cycle, that's important as Ryan has brought out. But what are some simple yet effective accessibility supports employers can overlook, or even creating that process? Like, are there things, where can they start with that just to know that what they have now?
Yeah, there are a lot of simple things, but I think to Ryan's point, it's about ensuring accessibility at every stage, right from the beginning, and then beyond and through the employment life cycle, right? And so some practical things right at the beginning, just to back up what Ryan's saying, is really getting employers to identify the essential skills of that role. And we've given some examples because that's usually an effective technique to, for some reason, to screen people out by, presuming some kind of aptitude, whether they have a license or not. So it's about identifying those really essential skills for the role and not advertising for the purple squirrel, as it's known in HR circles. We employers are generally asking for skills and things that they don't actually need, or and are never going to find. Other common things. So really accessibility at every stage, speaking to disability talent specifically adding statements in that are welcoming, that let people know that they are welcome to ask for accommodations through that process, backing that up with action and other narratives on websites are important as well. Those will be cues for people. But and then like some of the simpler accommodations that don't cost anything that employers are implementing all the time. Modified work hours, right? So modified schedules, flexible work arrangements. This was a really hard sell in 2019. It's easier to understand the effectiveness and allowing people those accommodations and supporting those. So work from home could be considered that. Modified duties. Inclusive communication is also extremely important, and reach out to consultants. There are people in the space that will support that. There's no real end point. It's a continuous work to provide things in accessible formats. And really practical advice we give to employers is I put up a slide in my presentations and I say, here's the secret weapon. And then we put up the acronym ATP, and everyone's writing this down. ATP stands for Ask the Person. So involve people, be open to that through that whole process, and then ongoing, right? Providing accessibility supports and accommodations for someone in the interview process, fantastic. But that's not it. You're not done there, and people may need periodic adjustments throughout that employment life cycle. So it's really about just building that in as business as usual from a management kind of point of view.
Okay, that's great. Some great tips. In terms of, and that is, we've taken the point, the employer is already sold on, they make it very accessible, recruitment, they're asking the person. What about the employers that, we're trying to educate now on the benefits? Sort of what, and I throw this out to everyone, whoever wants to jump in, how do you what are things to help change that mindset, or maybe success stories you've seen for leadership of employers to go, right, I see the benefits now?
I can jump in. I mean, it's really about first, finding out what the motivation is, and we take a business-centered approach at Odin. And when I started in this role about 5 years ago, it was a lot of meeting and presenting the business case and the numbers and all of the kind of other anecdotal kind of demonstration that being inclusive of people with disabilities is just really good for business. But that's not it, because if that was it, the numbers are very clear. There's a very clear business case. So it really is just about finding out what that jumping off point is with businesses and what their motivation is. And if their motivation is to increase shareholder value, which is profit, then we can demonstrate and show them practical examples. We also employ a business champion model at Odin. So we actually have a business champions league where we identify and recruit champions in various industries, and we have them come and speak and share about, and speak business to business. So that's a really important model as well. And, just keeping in mind, like, it's businesses that really decide. So, the work and the policies and everything we have to convince businesses to take that next step. So thankfully, and what I've seen over the last few years is a real acceptance of that business case. And we're at that point where businesses are coming and saying, okay, how do we do this? Because they're starting to recognize that if they don't figure this out, their competition is going to take over and have all of this great talent. And so it's really great to be moving beyond that business case, and like you're flushing out some of these kind of practical, simple things. But again, it just comes back to getting that will and finding what that motivation is for businesses to take that next step and showing them how to practically do it, right?
It's
Okay.
Ryan here. And building on that, the most simplest way that I kind of lay that out is if you don't change and if you don't accept it, you're going to be left behind. Think about what even 40 years ago, And I hate to sound sexist, but a lot of women were not in the workforce. And now we have powerful CEOs, we have managers, we have presidents that are women, and that has changed grotesquely over the last, even 20 years. And if you didn't adopt that, you're kind of being left behind too. So the world is changing, and I think you should adopt it. And there's a huge benefits that we've outlined, many of them already. So if you're looking at that from that point of view, I think that really reigns true when you give a good example. And it doesn't need to be that one, but if people are unwilling to change, they usually are set in their minds until they have that aha moment and consider it that sort of thing. The other thing that I like to point out is that just because myself, I have a disability doesn't mean I can do it, or not do it. It means that I just do it differently. For instance, if we have three people and we're all trying to get to the mall, maybe Kim is going to drive, JC is going to walk, and I'm going to take the bus. We all accomplish the same goal. We just do it differently. And that's the same thing, whether it's interpreting spreadsheets, whether it's answering the phone, sending emails, we all do it, maybe just in a different way, but we're still getting to that end goal.
That's a great point. I think even if everyone does things, there's many ways to do things, and I think that's a great point for employers to take away. And so, how could you think we could get is there a way? There's creating the inclusive workplaces, talking to the person to get their feedback, and how things can change. What could we move beyond and actually celebrate? Because it's a course of business, but I think that celebration that would snowball and create more of awareness. Are there things we can do that can celebrate yet keeping privacy considerations in event? Like, where have you seen success in that, or stories to tell about that?
I think that's a great question, Siobhan, and I think that, there again, we have to go back to JC's first principle of ask the person. And so, to me, the celebration starts by welcoming persons with different abilities into the workplace. And so, for tips on how you can do that, there are so many resources. JC has referred to a few. If you, for example, know that you have an employee who's living with a specific disability, best person you could possibly ask how you could support them is the individual themselves. If you're looking for more resources, you can reach out to the patient organization that supports that community. So for example, if you have an employee whom you know is living with multiple sclerosis or sight loss, please reach out to MS Canada or CNIB. They all have tremendous resources for employers in the workplace. If you don't have a specific individual in your workplace whom you are able to ask and whose needs you're hoping to accommodate, one of the things that we're building at Health Partners is a network of people with lived and living experience of a broad range of health conditions who will be able to be reached out to for their advice and their experiences, whether it's in a workplace or in another setting. And so you can reach out to organizations like ours and email network@healthpartners.ca, and we can help connect you with folks that can give you good advice and guidance on how to start bringing people into your workplace with diverse abilities, and then start celebrating their abilities and how they're adding to your organization's culture and productivity.
It's Ryan here, and I think that's an important point too. So what I like to think about this is the thing we use at the Come to Work program in CNIB is you can be special or equal, but not both. And I choose equal every single time. So for me, the example I like to give is think about an elevator that was originally made as an accessibility feature, whether you're a person that uses the wheelchair, a person that just couldn't climb stairs, you would get upstairs by using the elevator. And we all use them without even thinking about it on a daily basis, most of us. They just exist. That's how I want someone with a disability to exist in the workforce. Just it might be their identifier, like Ryan is blind, that's his identifier, but it doesn't define him. He does a great job because he is good at this, this, and this, or bad at this, that, and the other. And I think that's the stage we have to get to. How we get there, I don't know. I think we're taking great strides in doing it, but I think just having the person blend in as they are, air quotes, normal in society, I think is a really great kind of approach to take it to, you know, like you can be special or equal, but not both. And I don't want to ever be special. I always want to be equal.
That's another great, so I'm making this, that ask the person and special or equal, not both. That's great.
And
Anything to add, JC?
It just starts with these conversations and training, and there's a lot of options out there. And so, you know, it's a challenge to get people's attention in this current world. But once people pay attention, there's some exponential learning that can happen. You know, here at Odin, sometimes it starts with like less and less of those business case conversations, but it generally starts with a conversation. And I always tell this story that I asked to get I asked for 10 minutes in a strategic planning meeting. So I want to sit at the table with the C-suite for 10 minutes. I'm sometimes given 15 and I'm generally there for 40 minutes. So it's just that beginning the conversation. Sometimes I never speak with that table again, but then they help to push that message down. At other times, we're helping to push that message up. And it starts with, you know, investing in training and awareness across your entire workforce. And if I can just share now, I'm going to put the link in the chat because I was talking about this on Monday. There's a report I just perused from the Disability Inclusion Business Council that was released on Monday. It's called Bridging the Gap. I'll click this into the, I'll get it into the chat after I stop talking. I can't really multitask that well. But the 6 recommendations, and I'll be brief on these because we can expand, provide training opportunities to all level of staff about disability and accessibility in the workplace, right? Market, talk about it. That's how you start celebrating it and getting people just to talk about it. Inclusive design approaches. And so inclusive design is different than universal design. We don't have enough time to break that all out today, but inclusive design approaches that are ongoing, that go beyond compliance and accessibility standards. I was happy to see that in there. Accommodation approaches and adjustments by default, rather than relying on disclosure, right? We have this obsession with disclosure. What we really need to understand is what a person needs to do their job. We are not all psychologists and doctors. We don't need that diagnosis, right? That's the medical model. Number 4, ensure accessibility through the full employee life cycle. Like you're not done after handing a checklist of, you know, what kind of accessibility supports that you need. I'm being really sarcastic there because that is sometimes the misguided approach. And then, they mention AI and tech. So this is important that we're all ensuring that AI and tech that we adopt is ethical and accessible and is not exclusionary. And then I'm a business manager. That's how I think. So setting standards and goals and measuring performance. And I recommend that that companies build in disability inclusion measures into their performance-based pay structures. There's nothing that motivates executives better. It's a little controversial because we should be doing that, but it's this concept of where ethics and economics converges, and we can kind of take advantage of that with people that are driven by you know, bigger paychecks. So those were the 6 recommendations, and I'm gonna put this link in the chat.
Thank you, JC. That's great.
There we go.
JC was just pointing to, and look forward to reading that report. I think that there's a lot to be said for measuring and tracking the proportion of folks that you have living with disabilities in your workplace, as well as we track other examples of diversity metrics, or, you know, whether they're employment equity statistics. Health Partners is pleased to be a signatory of the Government of Canada's 50/30 challenge that challenges employers to have representation from based on gender and all other employment equity statistics among their senior leadership and the board. We know that what really started to make a difference in terms of the number of, for example, women that there are in senior leadership positions was when organizations were held to quotas for it and publicly reported on stock exchanges and so on. That's what sometimes it takes to motivate change. So track and report on who you've got in your workplace that identifies as living with a disability, and celebrate when you hit those targets that are so important.
That's great. And thank you, JC, for that report again. Yes? Looked like you're gonna.
Yeah, and just some of those measures, they can be really interesting, right? Like, we know that when you hire more people who have disabilities, your retention rates are improved. So start measuring that. You can start measuring, that rate of disclosure. I was very impressed that we had what was anonymous disclosure here this morning or this afternoon,
22%.
22%, because we're talking to businesses that are, doing really good work or in the 5 to 7% kind of range, right? So there's another measure. As that goes up, that's an indication on, the culture and how that's comfortable. And I mean, coming from a business perspective, measure your profits, measure your retention, measure your productivity. You will see that going up. Reflect that back to everyone in the organization. And make sure that that's well known. That is something to be celebrated within businesses.
So all great points. And while you struck me on a point, you said get past the compliance, JC. It's an important step in creating inclusive workplaces. What are some resources employers could use to get compliance and measurements good? What anything they can take hold of to get past that compliance, so it's a course of business and it's celebrated?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, compliance is really quite a low bar. So once you start doing this as a business and recognize the tangible and intangible value, even just the shift in workplace culture, people are coming to work more often. I mean, it's just it's just obvious why you want to figure this out. And so just keeping that in mind, we're getting, there's accessibility standards are evolving, but 20-year anniversary of AOTA in Ontario, and we're not where we should expect to be. There's issues with, enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. So, so we actually have I think I shared this with the resource sheet that Eli will send out. If I haven't, I will
Great.
do this. But we have um, an enabling change project right now that's called Beyond Compliance, and it's just it's making that business case and kind of just shedding light on the reasons why you want to go beyond that. And if anyone's interested in the compliance piece, I can refer you to those resources, but that's really a
We
low
want
bar.
them to get past that. So
Absolutely.
those tangible resources we'll be able to share will be great. And actually, in another project we're creating a lot of idea resources on our website. A lot of this is going to be this is going to be a library for resource for not just with persons with disabilities, but the whole spectrum of diversity. So those will be great to be able to share, JC.
It's Ryan here too. Just building on that too. The way I like to look at the AODA is I couldn't have said it better myself, but that's the lowest bar between being legal and illegal. You can always do better, and I always encourage employers to think of that as like, hey, if you're not doing those things, it's illegal. So look at how much more above the bar you can get, and I love that you guys have these projects going on because it speaks to what is needed, and it's a great kudos to you guys and your organizations.
Great. I look forward to all that reading on those. And you mentioned that report on Monday, JC, and I downloaded it, but I haven't had a chance. So thank you for doing the recommendations. They align with what we're saying. How can companies better educate their employees? So other and management about this, like we have sessions internally on diversity, equity, inclusion. What are the educational and awareness programs other than sessions like this? Are there other tangible things? I know we're having a team session next week. We bring all the team because we're across Canada, BioTalent Canada, and we have someone who's visually impaired, and we're actually going to live experience of her for a bit to see how it is to get around. Like we're doing things like that. Are there things like that that employers can do to put themselves in their shoes and see
It's Ryan. I'd like to take a step back from that even and not so much go from the training aspect, but go for the fun and innovative way. And I know you can't do all of them, but it seems like every single day and every single month is day of this, diabetes day, other days, those sorts of things. Why not do a celebration for a few of them throughout the year? For Gay Pride Month, you can do something in that month, whether it's a fun educational something where you're making the learning fun and people will tend to remember it a little bit better rather than going into a training session and be like, oh, this is another training session. I'm being inclusive or doing this or doing that. I think that if you can turn it around and make it fun and more of a celebration, yet the people are learning unconsciously, I think that works very effectively.
Ryan and I are totally on the same wavelength. I think that it starts by sometimes, I mean, look, there's absolutely a place in organizations for training on things such as unconscious bias that affects every single one of us as humans, and that we do need and benefit from education on how to be aware of and overcome. And creating and embracing diversity of all kinds in the workplace means weaving it into everything we do, celebrating it, talking about it, asking questions about it. When you know, interview or feature an employee at an all staff gathering, uh, maybe with their consent, of course, you can talk about a disability that they may be living with as part of their profile, because as I think Ryan said earlier, you know, no one is only a person with diabetes or a person with sight loss. They are many, many other things at the same time. And so if we can, the more we can shine a light on the fact that this is a whole person with a whole career and a whole life and these other abilities, and weave it into every conversation or as many conversations as possible, that's where I think we really start to change our mindsets and our cultures to support diversity.
Thank you, Kim. And I'm looking at the chat. We have some questions I'd like to pose. How do the panelists recommend employers provide their hiring managers with anti-bias and ableism training?
I'm going to start by saying that I think that it goes well beyond hiring managers, because you know, hiring managers work within a culture and a construct. So I think it's really every person in a workplace who needs to be sort of encouraged to move beyond biases or ableism. And I think that, like I said a few minutes ago, maybe things like unconscious bias training in general can be supportive. And there are many, many, you know, consultants and organizations that provide those kinds of training. Also think about reaching out to organizations that provide programs related to specific groups of conditions, programs for people in the workplace. So the Mental Health Commission of Canada, for example, has just a phenomenal training program called Opening Minds, whereby they come into workplaces and they help train everyone in a workplace how to be sensitive to mental health challenges and how to support a colleague who may be living with them. Just so there's from broad to specific, there are so many resources out there, and just recognize that it's not just on the people in HR or what have you to be aware of these potential biases. It's on all of us.
It's Ryan here. One thing I do, and this is just on me. It's not written in any training or anything, and it's probably trickier to do if you're a person with vision. But when I'm looking at a resume or a cover letter, I read the name last. I tell my cursor to not read the name because you can tell certain things, whether it's a male, a female, more often than not. Maybe what culture they come from, if it's different. So I always read the name last. I want to know about the person first. I always give this story, and this is the perfect example of this. So if I was if I owned my own company, the way I would do interviews is, if anyone's familiar with the show The Voice, there's four judges. Their turn their back to the contestant on the stage. All they get to hear is the person's voice. Then if they like it, they'll hit a button, turn around, then they get to see the person. That's how I would conduct my interviews if I was an employer. I would Doesn't matter if the person's in a wheelchair, doesn't matter if they have a guide dog, doesn't matter if they're black, white, green, gold, doesn't matter if it's male, female, or if they have short hair, long hair, anything like that. You see them after the fact that you've decided that you like what they're offering you.
That's a great point, Ryan. JC, I think you had something to add.
Oh, just employee resource groups can be effective as well, and in just kind of highlighting diversity and promoting that kind of regular discussion and forums and just highlighting that and building it in, and then just to reiterate as well, like tone, it has to be tone from the top. It's super important. So we have to have the CEOs driving this and holding people to account as well, to ensure that this does happen. So supporting those groups. There's other things, mentorship and allyship kind of arrangements within organizations can also be helpful, can be an extension of those ERG, employee resource groups. So those are some practical things if you don't have those in place, to really kind of look at developing that.
Great, more practical, tangible tools, and this is what it's all about. This story doesn't end here. The next question, please forgive me if this question is already asked. How can we encourage organizations to invest in retention in addition to attraction? For instance, organizations may feel confident reforming their recruitment process for inclusivity without looking at their safety of internal systems once folks with disabilities are hired.
I think one important way that we can do that is it goes back to the point we were making a few moments ago about measuring. And it's, it's not enough to just measure how many people are within your workplace and identify as living with a disability, but it's a start. And as an employer, I'm always watching statistics on retention at the highest level. And then I'm looking at other aspects of retention. Am I losing more longer serving employees versus more newer employees? Am I losing more women than men or vice versa? So if you start to see that there's a change in those metrics, that's a really important sign to be digging down into. I think also, do things like administer employee opinion surveys and be asking and listening for what are the experiences of those with disabilities in the workplace. Are they feeling accepted? Are they feeling respected? Are they feeling able to be themselves, which is where we are all most effective and happy.
I mean, we just have to measure, if to convince businesses to invest in retention, we just have to have them measure the cost of that, because there's, depending on the role, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars actually to replace an employee. So if that's only one reason, then we want to invest in retention. But it's actually point 4 of those 6 recommendations in that report that I shared, that it's about ensuring accessibility through that full employee life cycle. And to point out, I mean, we are all only temporarily abled. So during our work career, many of us will acquire disabilities. So we need to be prepared as employers to accommodate that at any stage in the process. There's episodic disabilities that are challenging to kind of accommodate at times for employers, but these are things, and there are ways to do it. And so we definitely need to be prepared. It's not just a one-stop solution at one stage. We need to be prepared to be really improving that throughout the entire life cycle of employment.
Thanks, JC. Ryan.
It's Ryan. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think they've said it before, my other panelists, but it starts at the top as well. If you're looking at retention of employment and things like that, as the CEO or as the C-suites or as the managers, the directors, making yourself more like a person and approachable is always that. So they can't, the employee's not scared to ask questions, bring accommodations to you, those sorts of things, because it can be pretty taxing on the employee themselves to have those difficult conversations. But then on the flip side, you have to be able to ask for help as someone that is an employee. You have to, going back to the interview process, If you're not telling the I know you have no right to, like, you don't have to actually disclose, but if you don't disclose, how can you expect the accessibilities to be something that you need and something that you want if you're not telling? You can't just expect it to be there.
And that's a good point, Ryan. Are there things that we're talking about employers, but the person with disabilities, how we can help them sort of know it's a safe space, or that there's not gonna be any unconscious bias or blatant bias by disclosing? Are there things and tools for the persons with disabilities when they're entering the workplace of how they can say, you know, I'm a person with disability, I may need this?
If I can help to answer that, I mean, we want to just as employers be genuinely accepting of people's needs when they disclose them, right? And so there's a little bit of a history of people having to prove their disability or prove the need for an accommodation, and that's really kind of backwards thinking. Um, so, oh, sorry, I totally just lost my thought there because I went on a little.
JC, cut me off when your thought comes back to you. Something that I really feel as a person who lives with a disability, I'm certainly aware that some folks have been terribly discriminated against, whether it's in a workplace or in some other aspect of their life. And so I don't mean for a second to imply that what I'm about to say is easy, but as someone that has a disability, I have to be aware that not everybody is going to immediately understand what it means to live with the condition that I do. And I have to have some patience and give them some grace. It's always better when those folks I might be talking to about what it's like show more respect and openness and curiosity. But I think I would agree with what I think I just heard Ryan say, which is if I am not willing to disclose and kind of take that personal risk and do a little bit of teaching, then I think I'm not in a very strong position to be frustrated that my needs aren't being met. I really have to speak them in order to expect that they might be met. So I would encourage everyone with a disability to, as much as you feel able, share with others and then help them in their learning journey.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And that was my point that I was trying to tie in, that it is a partnership and it's a two-way street. And so employees do have responsibility here, right? The issue of disclosure is a complex one, but employees cannot expect employers to read their minds, to understand things that they're not aware of, to know what they don't know. So I think that was what Ryan was trying to say, that it is, you know, there are responsibilities on both sides as well. It's not
It's
all on the
Ryan here
employer.
too. And just to build on that as well, so despite whether you're someone with a disability or not, if you're a job seeker, your goal is to impress the interviewer. And if you need some additional help to do that, I think I look better not fumbling around looking for where I'm going to go into the interview room. I ask for someone to meet me at the door. That's an accessibility feature. Simple, effective. I look way better going into a job interview, right? So it's kind of the vulnerability piece, but you also have to kind of, if you, like Kim said, if you're not ready to disclose, I don't know that you're ready to actually work. That's a big thing you have to be accepting. So for instance, I know I use a lot of visuals with the visual impairment, that sort of thing. But if I'm not ready to use a cane because I'm very vulnerable and I think people are going to take advantage of me because they can see the red and white mobility cane, then I don't know that I'm ready to travel. I don't know that I'm ready to work. There's certain things that you have to accept as a person, and everybody's timing is different. Could take someone a year, could take someone 20 years to get over that and to kind of become accepting of that. But you have to sort of know that within yourself as an employee, that you have the ability to kind of, and know that the employer is there to support. They're not asking you to call you out and to make fun of you and to not make the accessibility issues. That I think that you need to know that they're asking because they're genuinely concerned and genuinely offering the help and support to make the transition, the employment, the interview, the whole life cycle very accessible.
Thank you, Ryan, for that. And we're coming up to the top of the hour in a few minutes, so just want to sort of close off with one final question for everyone. And if you have any other final thoughts, and remember, there will be a feedback survey you'll see in an email, but it'll also be in the chat. That'd be great to get your feedback so we can improve this situation even more. What do you see as the future of disability inclusion in the workplace, and what some next steps could be or employers could be taking now besides what we've discussed?
I think at the risk of sounding ridiculously optimistic or utopic, my hope for the future of disability inclusion in the workplace is that it stops being a topic we need to discuss at all, because it's just part of who we are and how we do things. I think we're making great strides. We need to keep challenging ourselves to push farther, to become even more aware of our own unconscious biases, and to push through them, because it makes us better as workplaces. It makes us better as humans when we are surrounded by people with different abilities and perspectives and strengths to bring to the table. And so it's worth it. Let's keep trying.
Thanks, Kim.
I would echo that. I look forward to a day where we don't have to have these discussions, where it's just completely business as usual and just recognized as such.
It's Ryan. I guess I know this isn't an accepted word a lot of places, but I guess we could just normalize it, and that's what the other panelists have said. But I think that that's the way that I hope things go. We have a long way to go, and I know it's a marathon; it's not a sprint. But I think we're making some good strides. We're just all impatient in the time of social media and fast internet and phone calls and all that. So I think that this is a great experience. Thank you so much for having us all. I can speak for the other panelists, knowing that they echo that this has been wonderful, even just learning from each other, and can't appreciate you guys enough.
Thank you so much, Ryan, JC, and Kim. It's been a great discussion. Doesn't end here, but I look forward to today, the day it is just a normal course of business. Speaking of someone who works with a person with a visible or disability, that I'm working with her in the last 7 years, it's really changed my perspective. Like I actually forget sometimes there's a disability there because she's just an amazing person. So that said, thank you all for being here, being so open and disclosing disabilities and in this space and this discussion that is sometimes difficult, but happy that we're able to have it. We're closing out with one final question in the poll, if people can answer that, just to give us a sense of, do you feel more supportive in your workplace culture, knowing and through projects like this and having access to conversations and resources like this would be great. So thank you for all today for your time, and look forward to the continued support in this area. Thank you, Kim, JC, and Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan. Thanks, Eli. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
Bye.